Hi, my name is Gallegos, and in this introduction to philosophy of food, I wanted to show you something that means a lot to me personally, which is going to be the ability to control the food supply. Now, I don't want to get too wordy with this, but I was really interested in this class for a specific reason. Something you might have been familiar with was during the COVID lockdown, there was a lot of inaccessibility to food. I am deeply concerned by this, and a lot of the people that I've been talking to have been interested in the subject of what's called food deserts. Now, the certain parts of the valley are classified as food deserts without the ability to access fresh produce. Example being, Taylor, you'd be familiar with this, the hub of prosperity. My concern, though, is specifically the ability to control the means of food production for the purposes of ethics. So, the global agricultural system is flawed not just in its distribution, but in its exploitation of workers. The only worker here is me. Now, unless you count the chickens and the pollinators, but really the only work here is me. And so that would be a more ethical solution as opposed to moving and externalizing my costs over many workers. I think this is a lot more ethical. Now, what is pumpkin shakshuka? I would love to show you, and I'll take you right over there to the chicken coop. Hi, and this is the chicken coop, and these are my 7 laying hens. Why is this more ethical? Well, I think that this is more ethical than the traditional chicken farms because my chickens are free to roam if I so choose. There was a problem with a hawk, and it should be continuing to be a problem, but I have a movable chicken coop back there, and one of the things that I'd like to do is have them be more free range. And they definitely eat better than most of the chickens in the factories, which is, I don't know if you can tell, but they're getting pretty chunky. I'd like to show you this one. So, they've been eating mostly organic food, ideally entirely organic. Look pretty happy and healthy if I do say so myself, pretty proud of that. Chickens' heads are gyroscopically stable, I don't know if you, fun facts. Alright, well, I'd already harvested from them once today, and this is the second harvest I would like to show you. And these 2 are going to be going inside of our dish today. So, they produce pretty decent quality of eggs, and they're definitely better tasting than store-bought eggs, and I'd assume they'd be healthier for you. This is one of the other things I wanted to note. So, in eggplants, I don't know if you know this, but eggs are sorted out by size. So these aren't grade A eggs, but I still consider this to be pretty good quality. Now, I'm not wasting these eggs, but in a factory, these would not be up to par, because these are not the proper size. So, at least I get to eat them, and they're not going into whatever process they are, so less waste today. Now, since I'm only serving for 2 people, I'm only going to be using 2 eggs, because ideally, this would be a 4-egg dish for 2 people, but I also have another thing I wanted to share with them, and they had already eaten, so this is more for presentation purposes. So, this is the magnificent pumpkin patch. As you can see, it's all dead, but here are the remnants of some of the pumpkins that were on here. This is pretty ethical in my opinion, especially in terms of relating to like exploiting labor, because I did not even put in that much labor into this. So, in that sense, I haven't exploited anything. I think that's pretty cool. I just wanted to show you this is where the pumpkins were produced, and this is the best evidence I could muster. But as you can see, it's already past season. And I'd also used waste to grow these pumpkins. So these are tires that I found on the side of the road. I kept them out of the landfill. I'd consider that to be pretty ethical and better for the environment than as opposed to letting them accumulate, release into the soil. I don't really think that's a best option, but this is a good way to reclaim them, and you can grow stuff in them, so that's a plus. The other thing is I compost pretty much all of my own waste, so I get to use this compost to be growing my pumpkins, and that's, yeah, this is kind of overrun with grass right now, but all this grass gets composted as well. So this is a good system, and it keeps it so that way everything is contained. And for the time being, this was actually blanketed by the pumpkins. Currently the grass is overgrown, but that's not really much of a concern. Once I plant the pumpkins again, they'll actually be able to cover this entire area again, because they go out like a net. So I thought that would be pretty ethical, and this gets to show you where they come from. Hi, welcome to my kitchen. So one of the other notes that I wanted to mention about this special kind of plant is that you don't have to worry about refrigeration, which is going to be another thing that is going to be into the ethics and the philosophy of food. Because when you have food, you're not just eating the food, you're eating the energy that was put into that food. You're this is an input and output kind of system, which is something that Rosellas had mentioned in the agroecology class some of you may be taking. But if you're not familiar with the concept, the way that this works is that essentially there's going to be a lot more work that goes into this in the supermarket as opposed to if I were to be doing it here. And what I mean by that is that there's going to be a lot of energy that's going to be inputted into the system to get the same result. So at the supermarket, it would have to be either refrigerated with air conditioning within the market, or it would have to be processed, labeled, shipped, packaged, and then presented. And then not even all of them would be able to make it to the market because some of them would be unaesthetic. An example of which being some of these are not the proper shape. So here's an example. This one has spots. This may not be the best prime example of this. It's got a striation on the side, it's got spots, it's imperfect. This would not make it to market and be wasted. Instead, I actually get to store this, which is going to be a plus. I get to just leave this here. So there's no packaging, there's no aesthetic involved in this. There's very little waste, and the fact that it's not refrigerated saves on fossil fuels and the energy inputted into the system, as well as the fact that I'm not using synthetic fertilizers to grow these, which is another plus because I'm not polluting the environment. And if I am, it's not nearly to the extent that that the global agricultural system is. And you could tell by if you were to ever go down by the Rio, any of the fertilizer runoff from Mississippi all the way down, it comes all the way down to here. All this is going to be runoff. So we get a lot of algal blooms and we get Texas brown tide, very common down here because of the fertilizer runoff. So this is actually helping that. So one of the other things that I like to do is whenever I do this is I save the seeds. Now I could either turn these into pepitas, which is going to be another Hispanic aspect that I could, incorporate into this, and it is included in some of the recipes of this, but I prefer not to, and I prefer to save the seeds. You could include them into this dish. It would actually add a bunch of much needed oil into the dish. If you're not using any oil added into this, so that would be another way to use it. But I prefer to save the seeds because I get to grow these next year. And that's going to be really important because this is the farm. So I'm not going to be going through any of the desiccant spraying of the seeds. I don't have to use Roundup or anything like that. I don't have to exploit a bunch of laborers to actually run the machines to separate the seeds out, and that's a whole other aspect of this. So this skips all that. It's really just as simple as getting a knife, like cutting into the pumpkin. I love that. And just cutting into the pumpkin. And then that's it. So I could just go out and scoop out any of these seeds. Some of them I cut through, but that's not really that important. I just scoop these seeds out and I put them inside of that jar. So let me do that right now. One of the other things that I wanted to show you actually was going to be the onion. So most of the time when people prepare onions, they actually throw away the bottom bit, which is what actually I'm going to save and use for replanting. Actually, you can regrow onions. You've seen some videos probably on the internet floating around that you can put these in water and they can grow roots, and that is true. But you could also just leave the roots on if you pull them out of the ground. But if you were to getting them without the roots and you needed them to root, you could just simply stick them in soil. It would probably do them much better because it actually has nutrients as opposed to the water. One of the other things that I do with the pumpkins is actually save the tops as well as the bottom. So if you want, you could save this portion and use it as a garnish and cut it with scissors, and that's what I'm actually going to do for the dish. You could also do this for things like ramen, baked potato, whatever. You see those little green circles on, it's this. But the other thing you can do is the bottom, and this is what's going to be the base for our dish actually. I'm going to put this and chop it up and put it in the skillet first with a little bit of oil. And this is what's going to be processing and simmering down to be like more of like a caramelized onion kind of thing. You don't have to use an onion. You could use a leek or anything of the same sort. Or if you want, the same sort of thing would be really awesome as a veggie stock, which you could actually apply to the dish. But I could show you that later. For now, I'm just going to chop this up and put this in the skillet with a little bit of oil and start cooking.
Go.
So this is the main part of this recipe that is actually underappreciated. So oil is extremely difficult to produce, and corn oil has some really dubious ethics involved that I'm not going to get into here, but you don't have to use this. You could technically do this without any oil, or if you want to, press your own oil out of the pepitas, which are the pumpkin seeds. So you could use the pumpkins to make the oil for this dish. Now, I do not have the time for that, but if I were to need to, right, based off of what I can produce, technically I could still do that, where I could press the pumpkin seeds for the oil itself. In this case, I'm not doing that, and now all that I'm going to do is put it up to high, just so I can get it right up to the temperature, and throw these in there. And this is going to be causing causing them to caramelize, which is going to make them really... While that's getting down on the skillet, one of the things I wanted to show you was how to actually make the pumpkin sauce. Now this is extremely simple. A lot of recipes make this way more complicated and stick it in the oven and do a whole bunch of stuff to it. And it's like, oh, it needs to be baked and yada yada. You just stick it in the microwave. You just stick it in the microwave for like 5 minutes, and then the pumpkin becomes soft, and you scoop it out with a spoon. You don't need to see the exact... It's changed to a darker brown color on the outside. That's because of the steam that was coming off. I flipped them, and now I'm going to go in for another 5 minutes, and it should be fully done. I want to do like 5 minutes each side. So as you can see, the color of the pumpkin has changed fully to a brown, and it's now soft to the touch. Use an indentation, and so soft that whenever I try to pick it up by the stem, it actually started to fall apart. This is what you want. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to scrape this out. See how it falls like butter? It's like, that smells super sweet. What would you say that smells like? What is it?
Butter.
It smells like buttery. It's a very buttery, soft texture. You can eat it like this, but this is why it's perfect for the sauce, because I'm going to scoop this all out and mash it all in there. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So once you get it to this consistency, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get a spoon. Now, why a spoon, you ask? Well, that's a great question, if I could find the spoon. So, what you want to do is you want to make these little divots. Like something like this. Now this is going to be where you crack the egg, which I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to do it about that much apart. That seems fair. I'd assume that to be fair. Now I'm going to crack the eggs. And this is really the whole recipe. It's very, very simple. Actually, stunningly simple. You just crack an egg into that hole. And then that's it. This is it. Once those eggs cook, you're golden. It's that simple. And now, I'm going to make a little smiley face. And now that I've got the tops of the onions cut, I'm going to garnish this delicious masterpiece straight out of the garden. Very simple, and it took me like not a lot of time, so that's pretty cool. I think that's a very ethical dish. I don't see any problems with this. No animals were harmed in the making of this video. So there you go. No animal products other than an egg that my chickens were going to make anyway. So that's pretty ethical, I'd assume. So how would you guys describe this food?
Very savory and very buttery.
And rich and filling.
So it would be serviceable as a breakfast, a lunch?
I think this would be a good fall dish because it's hearty and warm for when it's cold outside.
It's
like for brunch.
Okay, so a good a fall brunch. Okay, well I'm glad you guys like it.